Blood dripped from Jeremiah Cole's knuckles as he hauled the twins up from the ravine, their faces ghostly pale in the moonlight. Below them, the slave traders' torches bobbed like the eyes of hunting wolves, and the sound of splintering wood meant they'd found the hidden entrance. "Move faster, girls, or we're all dead," he grunted, the bullet wound in his side screaming with each pull of the rope. But the twins, couldn't be more than 16, though they fought like seasoned killers, weren't panicking. Instead, they spoke in urgent whispers in a language that sounded older than the mountains themselves, their voices carrying an authority that made the hair on Jeremiah's neck stand up. "Jeremiah Cole," said the one with the eagle feather braided into her midnight hair, her English suddenly perfect, crisp as a schoolmarm's. "You have purchased our freedom with gold, but you do not yet understand what you have truly bought with blood." A war cry echoed from the canyon below, not the drunken shouts of common thugs, but something primal that spoke of ancient hatreds and older gods. "Well, darlin'," Jeremiah said, checking his Colt .45 with hands that had stopped shaking years ago, "whatever I bought, I sure as hell ain't selling it back." The girl's smile in the darkness was sharp enough to cut glass. "Good, because what comes next will either make you rich beyond imagining, or get you killed in ways your nightmares haven't invented yet." Gunfire erupted from below, muzzle flashes lighting the canyon like deadly fireflies. "What the hell did I get myself into?" Jeremiah muttered. "A war," the other twin said simply, "and we're about to win it." 3 days earlier, the whiskey burned Jeremiah's throat, but not as much as the sight that greeted him when Sheriff Briggs kicked open the saloon doors. Behind the corrupt lawman shuffled two figures that made every man in Malone's saloon look up from their cards and bottles. Young native women, barely more than girls, bound with rope that had rubbed their bronze skin bloody. But it wasn't their beauty that caught Jeremiah's attention. It was their eyes. Most captives he'd seen had the broken look of prey animals. Wide, darting, defeated. These two looked like caged wolves. Dangerous. Calculating. Waiting. "Got us a special auction tonight, boys," Briggs announced, his gold teeth glinting in the lamplight. These two hellcats were found wandering near the territorial line. Put up quite a fight, according to the boys who brought him in. No papers, no tribe claiming them. Far as the law's concerned, they're unclaimed property. Jeremiah felt his stomach turn. He'd seen this dance before. Corrupt officials finding excuses to sell native people into slavery, claiming they were vagrant or abandoned. It was legal in the gray areas between territories, and it made men like Briggs rich. "I'll start the bidding at $50 for the pair," Briggs called out. The room erupted in crude laughter and lewd comments. Jeremiah recognized some of the bidders, plantation owners from down south, mine foremen who worked their laborers to death, and worse. Much worse. 100. Called out Marcus Thornfield, a man whose reputation for cruelty preceded him across 3 territories. His handlebar mustache twitched with anticipation. 150, shouted another voice. Jeremiah found himself standing before he'd made the conscious decision to do so. Every head in the saloon turned toward him. He was known in Deadwood, a skilled tracker and hunter who kept to himself, paid his debts, and minded his own business. This wasn't his business. 200, he said quietly. The room fell silent. $200 was more money than most men in that saloon would see in 2 years. "You got $200, Cole?" Sheriff Briggs asked, his eyes narrowing. "That's a lot of money for a drifter." Jeremiah reached into his coat and pulled out a leather pouch, the proceeds from a tracking job he'd done for the territorial government, finding a gang of cattle rustlers. He'd been planning to use it to buy a small spread, maybe settle down for once in his 34 years. "I got it," he said, pouring the coins onto the bar. They clinked like tiny bells in the silence. Marcus Thornfield stood up, his hand resting on his gun. "Now hold on, Cole. I was here first, and I got business with those girls." "Business is done," Jeremiah said. He didn't touch his own weapon, but his stance shifted slightly, a subtle thing that every man with sense in that saloon recognized as a warning. Thornfield's face flushed red. "You think you can just waltz in here and—" "Marcus," Sheriff Briggs interrupted, greed overriding whatever loyalty he might have felt. 200 is 200. Sold to Mr. Cole. As Jeremiah led the 2 girls out of the saloon, past men whose stares made his skin crawl, He caught Thornfield's whispered words to his scarred lieutenant. Follow them. Kill the cowboy if you have to, but I want those girls. I've got buyers who pay extra for unbroken merchandise. The words hit Jeremiah like ice water. This wasn't just about money or labor. It was about something much darker. Outside, under stars that seemed too bright after the smoky saloon, Jeremiah's hands shook slightly as he cut the ropes binding the girls' wrists. They rubbed their wounds, but didn't run. Didn't even step back. Up close, he could see they were identical twins. Same high cheekbones, same intelligent dark eyes that missed nothing, same proud bearing that no amount of abuse had broken. You got names? He asked, his voice rougher than intended. The one with the eagle feather braided into her midnight hair studied his face for a long moment before answering. I am called Luna in your tongue. This is my sister, Stella. Her English was flawless, not the broken pigeon he might have expected, but educated, precise. Like she'd been raised speaking both languages. Those ain't native names, Jeremiah observed, watching their reactions carefully. Luna's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. We learned long ago that your people prefer names they can pronounce. Fair enough, Jeremiah thought. Well, Luna and Stella, I reckon you're free to go wherever you please. I didn't buy you to own you. The sisters exchanged a look that lasted exactly 3 heartbeats. But in those heartbeats, Jeremiah swore he saw an entire conversation take place. Decision, agreement, strategy. Where would we go? Stella asked, speaking for the first time. Her voice was softer than her sister's, but carried an undertone that reminded Jeremiah of distant thunder. Our people. She trailed off, and for just an instant, genuine pain flickered across her features. Our people are gone, Luna finished. Scattered like leaves in a winter storm. But even as she said it, Jeremiah caught something else in her expression. Relief? As if being unclaimed was exactly what they'd wanted to be. As if this whole situation was somehow convenient. Well, he said finally, studying their faces. I got a camp about 5 miles north of here. You're welcome to it for tonight, at least until you figure out your next move. You are not what we expected, Luna said, and this time there was genuine surprise in her voice. What did you expect? Someone who would demand payment for his kindness. Jeremiah shrugged, but his eyes never left theirs. Only payment I want is knowing you're safe. As they walked toward his camp, he couldn't shake 2 things. First, that these weren't ordinary refugee girls. The way they moved, constantly scanning their surroundings, positioning themselves to watch each other's backs, reminded him of trained soldiers. And second, that they'd been watching him just as carefully as he'd been watching them. Testing him, maybe. But for what? The attack came at dawn. Jeremiah woke to the sound of Luna's voice, urgent but controlled. Jeremiah, we have visitors. He rolled out of his bedroll, Colt already in hand, and peered through the tall grass surrounding their camp. 6 men on horseback formed a loose circle around them. Marcus Thornfield and his crew, all armed and ready for trouble. Well, Thornfield called out. Cole, you cost me a pretty penny yesterday, and I don't like being embarrassed in front of the whole saloon. You weren't embarrassed, Jeremiah called back, not showing himself. You were outbid. Big difference. I'm prepared to make you a generous offer, Thornfield continued. Give me the girls, and you keep half your money. Hell, I'll even throw in an extra 50 for your trouble. Jeremiah glanced at the twins. They'd positioned themselves back to back without any signal he'd seen. Luna facing north, Stella facing south. Both had picked up rocks, good throwing size, he noted, and held them with the casual grip of people who knew how to use them. Counter-offer, Jeremiah shouted. You ride away, and you keep breathing. That's generous enough. Thornfield's laugh was ugly. 6 against 1, Cole. I like those odds. 7 against 6, Luna said quietly, just loud enough for Jeremiah to hear. Can't ask you ladies to. You are not asking, Stella interrupted. We are telling. What happened next would haunt Jeremiah's dreams and his nightmares for the rest of his life. Thornfield gave the signal, and his men spurred their horses forward like the horsemen of the apocalypse. Jeremiah rose to fire, but Luna was already in motion, her body uncoiling like a striking rattlesnake. The rock left her hand with the velocity of a rifle bullet, catching the nearest rider square between the eyes with a wet crack that echoed across the canyon. The man toppled backward off his horse, dead before he hit the ground. Stella's throw followed a heartbeat later, not at a man, but at her target's horse, striking the animal's front legs with surgical precision. Horse and rider went down in a tangle of screaming flesh and breaking bones. But it wasn't just their deadly accuracy that turned Jeremiah's blood to ice water. It was the way they moved together. Like dancers who'd performed this exact routine 1,000 times, they flowed around each other in perfect synchronization. Luna dove for the fallen rider's rifle, while Stella vaulted onto the wounded horse's back and somehow, impossibly, calmed the panicked animal with nothing more than a touch and a whispered word in a language that sounded older than time itself. The rifle in Luna's hands barked twice in rapid succession, 2 precise shots that shattered kneecaps and sent 2 more of Thornfield's men tumbling from their saddles, screaming. Meanwhile, Stella had wheeled her stolen mount around and was charging straight at Thornfield himself, letting out a war cry that seemed to split the very air. The sound froze every man's blood. Jeremiah had heard Comanche war cries, Sioux battle songs, Apache death chants. But this was something else entirely. Something primal and terrifying that spoke of ancient powers and older gods. In less than 90 seconds, it was over. 4 of Thornfield's men were down, 1 dead, 3 wishing they were. The 5th was fleeing back toward town, whipping his horse into a foam-flecked frenzy. And Thornfield himself was on his knees in the dirt, Stella's commandeered rifle pressed against his temple, while Luna held his own gun steady on his heart. Jesus Christ, Jeremiah whispered. Luna looked over at him, not even breathing hard. You may want to avoid taking the Lord's name in vain. Where we come from, such things have consequences. Where exactly do you come from? The sisters exchanged another of those looks. That, Stella said, is complicated. Thornfield started to rise, and Luna casually pistol-whipped him back down. Stay, she commanded, in the same tone someone might use with a disobedient dog. Look, Jeremiah said, holstering his Colt. I don't know what kind of training you girls had, but that was necessary, Luna finished. Marcus Thornfield is known to us. His reputation extends far beyond these territories. Known to you? How? Stella dismounted and approached Thornfield, crouching down to look him in the eye. Tell me, Marcus, she said conversationally. Do you remember a Pawnee village you raided 2 years ago? South of the Platte River. Thornfield's face went white. I don't know what you're talking about. 43 people, Stella continued. Mostly women and children. You and your men sold the survivors to mine owners in Colorado Territory. That was different. Those were just Luna's rifle but connected with his jaw, cutting him off. Just what? Just people who didn't matter. Jeremiah felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. You two weren't wandering near the territorial line by accident, were you? No, Luna said simply. We were hunting. Hunting what? Him. She nodded toward Thornfield. Among others. Stella stood up, her expression cold as winter stone. Marcus Thornfield, by the authority vested in us by the 7 council fires, you are judged guilty of murder, slavery, and crimes against the sacred laws of hospitality. The what? Jeremiah asked. 7 council fires, Luna repeated. The alliance of our 7 tribes. And the sentence for his crimes is death. She raised the rifle. Wait. Jeremiah stepped forward. You can't just execute him. Why not? Stella asked. Your courts will not try him. Your law does not recognize our people as deserving of justice. That don't make it right too. Jeremiah Cole, Luna said, her voice carrying a strange formality. You have shown us kindness when you could have ignored our plight. You have stood with us against our enemies when you could have walked away. For this, we grant you the right to speak for his life. I what? Speak for him. If you believe he deserves mercy, we will listen. Jeremiah looked down at Thornfield, who was bleeding from his mouth and staring up with desperate eyes. The man was a monster. Jeremiah had heard the stories, knew about the raided villages, the people sold into slavery, the casual brutality that followed Thornfield wherever he went. But executing him in cold blood. He's got information, Jeremiah said finally. About other slave traders, about where the people from that Pawnee village might have been taken. Dead, he's useless. Alive, he might help you find them. The sisters considered this. You would guarantee his cooperation? Stella asked. I'd guarantee he'd wish he was dead if he didn't cooperate. Luna nodded slowly. This is wisdom. Very well. She looked down at Thornfield. You will give us the names of every trader, every buyer, every location where you have sold our people. In exchange, you will live in a territorial prison, but you will live. And if I refuse? Stella's smile was sharp as a blade. Then you die here, and we find the information another way. Thornfield, faced with those two options, began talking. As Thornfield spoke, spilling names and locations with the desperate speed of a man bargaining for his soul, Jeremiah began to understand that he'd stumbled into something far bigger and deadlier than a simple rescue. The twins weren't refugees. They were instruments of justice, sharp as Toledo steel and twice as dangerous. But that raised an even more chilling question. If they were working for this 7 council fires, why had they been in that slave auction? And why did every instinct he developed in 34 years of staying alive tell him they'd wanted to be there? The answer, when it came, would shake his understanding of everything he thought he knew about the world. After they'd secured Thornfield and his surviving men and started the 3-day journey to the territorial marshal's office in Cheyenne, Luna finally began peeling back the layers of deception like an onion, each revelation more stunning than the last. The 7 council fires is not what your government believes it to be, she explained as they rode side by side through a landscape painted gold by the dying sun. Your officials think it is a temporary alliance, 7 tribes cooperating for mutual defense until the threat of westward expansion passes. But it ain't. Jeremiah asked, though he already knew the answer from the way her eyes had gone cold and distant. No. She glanced at Stella, who was riding point with the unconscious grace of someone born to the saddle. It is something much older and much more significant. How significant are we talking? Tell me, Jeremiah Cole, what do you know of the prophecies of the first people? Jeremiah shrugged. Not much. I've heard stories, something about 7 sacred fires, a great cleansing, the return of the old ways. Most white folks figure it's just stories. Most white folks are wrong. Luna's voice carried a weight that made Jeremiah pay closer attention. The prophecies speak of a time when the sacred balance would be broken, when greed and violence would spread across the land like a plague. They also speak of 7 lights that would be kindled to hold back the darkness. 7 lights. 7 tribes, each carrying a sacred fire. 7 leaders who would unite them when the time came. She paused. 7 brothers and sisters who would stand against the darkness, even if it meant sacrificing everything. Something cold settled in Jeremiah's stomach. Brothers and sisters? The prophecy is specific, Luna continued. 7 children, born under the convergent star, marked with the signs of leadership, trained from birth to serve not just their own tribes, but all the first peoples. Children like you and Stella? Luna's smile was sad. We are 2 of the 7, yes. Jeremiah felt the world shift around him. Jesus Christ. You're not just warriors. You're princesses is the word your people would use, though it does not translate well. We are the inheritors of 7 sacred fires, the keepers of 7 ancient bloodlines, the chosen leaders of 7 tribes that together represent over 50,000 people. 50,000. The number hit Jeremiah like a physical blow. And you let yourselves get captured and sold at a slave auction. We allowed ourselves to be placed in a position where we might be captured. Stella called back from her position ahead. She'd been listening to their conversation. There is a difference. What kind of difference? Luna reined in her horse and waited for Jeremiah to do the same. Behind them, Thornfield and his men continued their stumbling march, guarded by the stolen rifle Stella had rigged to a pack horse. A clever arrangement that kept the weapon trained on them even when neither sister was holding it. Jeremiah, Luna said seriously, what we are about to tell you will put your life in danger. Are you certain you wish to know? Darlin', my life's been in danger since the moment I walked into that saloon. Might as well know why. The slave trade in these territories is not random, she began. It is organized, systematic, and protected by people in positions of great power. People who profit not just from the sale of native people, but from the information they provide under torture. Information about what? Tribal movements, sacred sites, resource locations. Her voice hardened. And the identities of the 7 prophecy children. Jeremiah felt ice form in his veins. Someone's hunting you. Someone has been hunting us for 3 years, Stella said, circling back to join them. 2 of our brothers are already dead. Another sister has vanished. We believe she is being held somewhere in Colorado territory. And you thought the best way to find her was to get yourselves sold into slavery? We thought the best way to find her was to follow the network that took her, Luna corrected. The auction in Deadwood was meant to be a link in that chain. But I screwed it up by buying you instead of letting Thornfield have you. You did not screw it up, Stella said firmly. You changed it. Perhaps for the better. How do you figure? Luna pulled a folded paper from her jacket with the reverence of someone handling sacred scripture. Because Marcus Thornfield just gave us something more valuable than infiltrating one slave auction, or a dozen of them. She handed him the paper, and Jeremiah's hands trembled slightly as he unfolded it. It was covered in Thornfield's desperate, blood-spotted scrawl: names, locations, dates, money amounts, connections between buyers and sellers that stretched across multiple territories like a spider's web of human misery. "Sweet Mother of God," Jeremiah whispered. "This is a map of the entire network." "Not just the network," Stella called back, her voice carrying a note of grim satisfaction. "Look at the names at the top of the page." Jeremiah studied the paper more carefully, and when he saw what was written there, underlined 3 times in Thornfield's panicked handwriting, his blood turned to ice water in his veins. Territorial Governor Hamilton, Federal Marshal Blackwood, General Morrison, U.S. Army. He looked up at Luna, seeing his own horror reflected in her dark eyes. "Jesus Christ. This goes all the way to Washington." "Higher than you know," Luna said, her voice carrying the weight of terrible knowledge. "Thornfield believes the orders are coming from the president's own cabinet. Someone at the very top of your government wants the 7 prophecy children found and eliminated, no matter the cost, in innocent blood." "But why? What threat could 7 kids possibly pose to the United States government?" Stella reined in her horse and waited for them to catch up, her expression harder than winter granite. "Because if the prophecy is fulfilled, if the 7 tribes truly unite under our leadership, it will mean the end of manifest destiny. No more stolen land, no more broken treaties, no more massacres disguised as glorious battles for civilization. It will mean," Luna added, "the first real native nation with the military power and political unity to stand as equals with the United States government. A nation that could close the Western territories to white settlement permanently." Jeremiah stared at the paper in his hands, understanding finally hitting him like a thunderbolt. "This ain't about saving a few people from slavery. This is about saving your entire way of life." "Our way of life, and the lives of everyone like us," Stella confirmed. "Every tribe that has been pushed from their homeland, every family that has been split up and sold, every child who has been taken to boarding schools to have their culture beaten out of them. But you're just 2 people. Even with these names, even with this information, how can 2 people fight the entire U.S. government?" The sisters exchanged another of their meaningful looks. "Who said we were only 2 people?" Luna asked. As if summoned by her words, riders appeared on the horizon. Jeremiah counted at least 20, possibly more, approaching at a steady pace. His hand moved instinctively to his gun. "Easy," Stella said. "They are friends." "Friends of yours?" "Warriors of the 7 council fires," Luna explained. "They have been tracking us since we left the auction." "Tracking you? Why didn't they help when Thornfield attacked?" "Because," Luna said with a slight smile, "we told them not to. We needed to see what kind of man you were, Jeremiah Cole. Whether you would stand with us when it mattered. And you passed the test." The riders drew closer, and Jeremiah could see they were indeed native warriors, but not from any single tribe. He recognized Lakota, Cherokee, Pawnee, and others, all riding together with the easy cooperation of longtime allies. Leading them was a man who looked like he could break a horse in half with his bare hands. Scars crisscrossed his bare chest, and his eyes held the flat stare of someone who'd seen too much violence and was always ready for more. "Stone Bear," Luna called out in greeting. "Little sisters," the big man replied, his voice like distant thunder. "You have been busy." "Productively busy," Stella corrected. "Stone Bear, meet Jeremiah Cole, the man who bought our freedom." Stone Bear studied Jeremiah with the intensity of a hawk evaluating prey. "The man who changed our plans, you mean?" "Sometimes plans need changing," Luna said diplomatically. "Sometimes," Stone Bear agreed. His gaze moved to Thornfield and the other prisoners. "And sometimes they need to be finished properly." His hand moved to the tomahawk at his belt. "Wait," Jeremiah said quickly. We need them alive. They have information about the other prophecy children. Information can be extracted from dead men as easily as living ones, Stone Bear observed. Can it? You planning to hold a seance? Stone Bear's expression didn't change, but several of the other warriors chuckled. You have humor, white man. That is good. You will need it for what comes next. What comes next? Luna dismounted and approached Stone Bear's horse. They spoke in rapid whispers in a language Jeremiah didn't recognize. Finally, Stone Bear nodded and turned back to Jeremiah. We have received word from our scouts in Colorado territory, he said. Your federal government is planning something they call the final solution. Final solution to what? To the Indian problem, Stella said bitterly. Complete elimination of all native peoples from the territories, to be accomplished within the next 6 months. Jeremiah felt the bottom drop out of his world. That's genocide. Yes, Luna said simply. It is. And we are the only thing standing between them and 50,000 innocent people. 50,000 people against the entire U.S. Army? 50,000 people who know every rock, every stream, every hiding place in this territory, Stone Bear corrected. 50,000 people who have nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. And, Stella added, 5 surviving prophecy children who are about to unite the 7 tribes for the first time in 300 years. 5? Jeremiah asked. I thought there were 7. Luna's face darkened. Our brother Brave Eagle was murdered last week, shot down by soldiers while carrying a white flag of truce. That leaves 5 of us, Stella continued. Luna and myself, our sister Morning Star who is imprisoned somewhere in Colorado, our brother Thundercloud who leads the Northern Resistance, and our youngest sister, Little Fox, who is barely 14 and hidden with the Cherokee in Oklahoma territory. But even 5 of you are enough, Stone Bear interrupted. According to the prophecy, only 5 are needed to kindle the sacred fire that will unite all tribes. 7 was the ideal, 5 is the minimum. But first, Luna said, we need to rescue Morning Star and expose this final solution before it begins. And to do that, Stella added, we need to get this information to someone in Washington who isn't part of the conspiracy. Jeremiah looked around at the assembled warriors, at the 2 young women who carried the hopes of thousands on their shoulders, at the prisoners who held the keys to a network of corruption that reached the highest levels of government. He thought about his original plan, buy a small spread, settle down, live a quiet life. That plan had died the moment he'd stood up in that saloon. All right, he said finally. What do you need me to do? Luna smiled, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked like the teenager she actually was. We need you to help us start a war, Jeremiah Cole. And then, Stella added, we need you to help us win it. The War Council met that night in a hidden canyon 20 miles south of Cheyenne, a place sacred to the Arapaho that had been used for momentous gatherings since before Columbus ever dreamed of sailing west. Jeremiah had never seen anything like it. Representatives from 7 different tribes, their faces painted with the colors of war and mourning, speaking in a symphony of languages but united by a single, burning purpose, survival. But it was more than survival driving them now. It was the chance for something that hadn't existed in 3 centuries, a native nation that could meet the United States as an equal. Luna and Stella sat at the center of the circle like twin flames in the darkness, no longer the helpless auction victims he'd first encountered, but revealed as the natural-born leaders they'd always been. To their left sat Thundercloud, a Lakota war chief whose tactical genius was matched only by his reputation for cold-blooded efficiency. To their right sat White Dove, a Cherokee medicine woman whose whispered words carried more authority than most generals' shouted orders. The situation is worse than our darkest fears, Thundercloud began, his voice carrying easily across the gathering. Our scouts report that General Morrison has received direct orders from Washington to begin the final solution in exactly 14 days. All native peoples are to be concentrated in designated killing fields for what they're calling final processing. A ripple of rage ran through the assembly like wildfire through dry grass. Jeremiah had learned enough about reservation conditions to know that processing was just a clean word for systematic murder. How many soldiers are we facing? Stone Bear asked, his scarred hands already moving toward his weapons. 3 full regiments, with more coming from the east by rail every day. Over 5,000 men, with field artillery and cavalry support. They're planning the largest military operation in the territory's history. Against our 50,000? White Dove asked, though her voice suggested she already knew the answer wouldn't be comforting. Against our 50,000 scattered across hundreds of miles of territory, Thundercloud corrected grimly. They plan to hit us tribe by tribe, prevent us from uniting. Classic divide-and-conquer tactics. Then we unite first, Luna said, her voice cutting through the murmur of concerned voices like a blade through silk. Before they can fire a single shot. Easier said than done, little sister, rumbled Iron Horse, the Pawnee war chief. Some of our tribes have been enemies for generations. Getting the Lakota and Crow to fight side by side will happen, Stella interrupted, because the alternative is extinction. She stood and walked to the center of the circle. In the firelight, she looked older than her 16 years, carrying herself with the dignity of someone born to command. My brothers and sisters, she said, and her voice somehow reached every person in that canyon without shouting. For 300 years, we have allowed our differences to divide us. The white man's government has used our old feuds against us, convinced us that our true enemies were each other instead of those who would steal our land and enslave our children. But the prophecy, began one of the Cherokee representatives. The prophecy is coming true, Luna said, rising to stand beside her sister. The 7 sacred fires are being rekindled. But prophecies are not magic, brothers and sisters. They are promises we make to ourselves and to our children about the kind of future we will create. Jeremiah found himself standing as well, though he wasn't sure why. All eyes turned to him. I ain't got much right to speak here, he said slowly. I'm just a cowboy who got in over his head. But I've seen your sisters fight, and I've heard what they're up against. He looked around the circle, meeting each person's eyes. Your government, my government, has decided you don't deserve to exist. They're planning to wipe you out like you were nothing more than dangerous animals. Tell us something we do not know, white man, Iron Horse growled. Here's what you might not know, Jeremiah continued, pulling out Thornfield's confession. They're scared of you. Scared enough to involve governors and marshals and generals in a conspiracy to commit murder on a scale that would make the devil himself sick. He handed the paper to White Dove, who studied it carefully before passing it on. They're scared because they know that if you unite, if you fight together instead of separately, you can win. You've got the numbers, you've got the knowledge of the land, and you've got something they don't. What's that? Thundercloud asked. You've got nothing left to lose, Jeremiah said simply. A man with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous thing on earth. 50,000 people with nothing left to lose. He shrugged. That's an army that can change the world. The circle fell silent, processing his words. Finally, White Dove spoke. The white cowboy speaks wisdom. But wisdom alone will not stop 5,000 soldiers with guns and cannons. No, Luna agreed. We need more than wisdom. We need a plan. Over the next 3 hours, that plan took shape like a masterwork being carved from raw stone. It was audacious beyond belief, dangerous enough to get them all killed, and had about a dozen different ways it could go catastrophically wrong. It was also, Jeremiah had to admit as the pieces fell into place, absolutely brilliant in its simplicity. The first phase was surgical intelligence gathering. Using the information from Thornfield's blood-soaked confession, they would map out the entire corruption network like anatomists dissecting a corpse, identifying every collaborator, every slave trader, every government official who had sold their soul for silver. The second phase was lightning rescue operations. Teams of their best warriors would simultaneously strike at known slave camps and prisons across 7 territories, liberating as many captives as possible, including, if the gods were merciful, Morningstar herself. The third phase was explosive exposure. They would gather ironclad proof of the final solution and get it to someone in Washington with both the power and the integrity to stop it, assuming such a person still existed in that den of corruption. And the fourth phase, if all else fails, Thundercloud said, his voice dropping to a growl that promised violence. We make them regret they ever heard the words Indian problem. Guerrilla warfare, Jeremiah translated, understanding the implications. Is there any other kind worth fighting? Stella asked with a smile that would have made a wolf step back. As the council broke up and the various tribal representatives prepared to return to their people with the news, Luna approached Jeremiah. You do not have to be part of this, she said quietly. You have already done more than anyone could ask. Maybe, but I got a question for you. Ask it. That first night, when I cut the ropes off your wrists, you could have overpowered me anytime you wanted, couldn't you? Luna's smile was enigmatic. Yes. And when Thornfield attacked us, you and Stella could have handled that yourselves, no trouble. Yes. So why didn't you? Luna was quiet for a long moment, staring up at the stars. Because sometimes, Jeremiah Cole, the most important battles are not won by strength, but by trust. You needed to know that we were worth fighting for. We needed to know that not all white men are our enemies. And do you? Know that, I mean. We know that you are not our enemy, she said. That is enough. But as Jeremiah rolled out his bedroll that night, he couldn't shake the feeling that Luna hadn't answered his real question. There was something else, something she wasn't telling him about why they'd allowed themselves to be captured in the first place. Something that would matter a great deal before this was all over. 2 weeks later, the simultaneous strikes across Colorado and Wyoming territories began at dawn on a Tuesday that would be remembered as either the day the West died or the day it was reborn. Jeremiah led one of the rescue teams, along with Stone Bear and a dozen warriors whose reputations for violence preceded them like thunder before lightning, to a mine outside of Boulder where their carefully gathered intelligence suggested Morning Star was being held. The intelligence was a lie. This was a trap, Stone Bear growled as they crouched in the rocks overlooking the mine entrance, his scarred hands already reaching for the tomahawk at his belt. Below them, instead of the expected handful of board guards, were over 100 soldiers in full battle gear, positioned with the precision of men who'd been planning this moment for weeks. They knew we were coming, Jeremiah agreed, his mouth dry as alkali dust. Question is, how the hell did they know? His answer came in the form of a familiar voice calling out from the mine entrance, a voice that hit him like a punch to the gut. Jeremiah Cole, I know you're up there, you bleeding heart fool. Marcus Thornfield emerged from the mine like a snake from its hole, no longer the bound and beaten prisoner they'd left in federal custody, but wearing a clean cavalry uniform and carrying a rifle with the casual confidence of a man who held all the cards. Behind him came General Morrison himself, along with Federal Marshal Blackwood and a dozen other officials whose names Jeremiah recognized from the confession that had apparently been worth less than the paper it was written on. You backstabbing son of a bitch, Jeremiah muttered, his hand moving instinctively toward his Colt. You played us like a fiddle. He played you, Stone Bear corrected, his voice carrying the bitter wisdom of a man who'd seen too many betrayals. But we were prepared for treachery. You were. Little sister's orders. She said to trust you completely, but to trust no one else even halfway. From their position in the rocks, they could see the trap laid out below them like a spider's web designed by a master architect. The mine was surrounded by soldiers hidden in positions that would have caught any rescue team in a devastating crossfire. If they'd approached as originally planned, they would have walked straight into a slaughter that would have ended the resistance before it truly began. Jeremiah Cole, Thornfield called again, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. I've got something special here that you'll want to see. Something that'll break that noble heart of yours. 2 soldiers emerged from the mine's dark mouth, dragging a young native woman between them like a broken doll. Even from a distance, Jeremiah could see the family resemblance to Luna and Stella. The same proud bone structure, the same defiant eyes, though these were filled with pain and a rage that burned like banked coals. Morning Star. But something was wrong with the way she moved, the way her head lolled. Your little princess friends have been very talkative, Thornfield shouted, his voice dripping with malicious satisfaction. Told us all about their prophecy nonsense, their grand plans for uniting the tribes. Did you really think we'd fall for such an obvious trick from a bunch of savage children? Jeremiah felt ice forming in his stomach, spreading through his veins like poison. What's he talking about? Stone Bear's expression was grim as winter granite. I think we are about to find out something we will not like. The best part, Thornfield continued, clearly enjoying himself, is that they led us right to all the other tribes. Even now, my colleagues are rounding up every last savage in 7 territories. Your little rebellion is over before it began, and 50,000 Indians are about to learn what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you. It's not possible, Jeremiah whispered, but doubt was already gnawing at his certainty like acid. Luna and Stella would never. Wouldn't they? General Morrison stepped forward, his voice carrying easily across the canyon with the practiced projection of a man accustomed to addressing large crowds. Tell me, Mr. Cole, did it never strike you as odd that two young girls could fight like seasoned cavalry officers? That they seemed to know exactly where to find information about slave traders? That they appeared to trust you so completely, so quickly, when every other native in the territory treats white men like plague carriers? Jeremiah's world tilted on its axis like a ship in a hurricane. You're saying they're working for you? I'm saying they're very good at their jobs, Morrison replied with the satisfied smile of a cat who'd caught a particularly clever mouse. Government agents, Mr. Cole, trained from childhood to infiltrate native communities and report back on resistance activities. The whole prophecy children's story was quite clever, gave them access to tribal councils across multiple territories without anyone suspecting their true allegiance. You're lying. But even as Jeremiah said it, pieces of the puzzle began falling into place with sickening clarity. Luna's perfect English, spoken like someone educated in Eastern schools. The way both sisters had seemed to know exactly what to say to earn his trust. Their mysterious appearance at the slave auction, as if they'd wanted, no, needed, to be there. Am I? Morrison gestured with theatrical flourish, and two more figures emerged from the mind's shadows. Luna and Stella walked out side by side, their movements still carrying that fluid grace he remembered, but now it looked like what it had always been, the calculated bearing of trained operatives. No longer dressed in the simple clothes they'd worn as refugees, they now wore clean military uniforms with lieutenants' bars gleaming on their shoulders. Stone Bear's rifle was already rising toward the twins when Jeremiah grabbed the barrel with desperate strength. Wait, he said, his voice hoarse with conflicting emotions. They betrayed us all, white man. They betrayed you most of all. Stone Bear's eyes burned with the fury of a man who'd seen his people sold out one too many times. Maybe, but something's not right here. Down in the canyon, Luna stepped forward, and when she spoke, her voice carried across the space between them with the clear authority of someone accustomed to command. Jeremiah Cole, Stone Bear, warriors of the Seven Fires. You have walked into our trap, but you still have a choice. Here it comes, Stone Bear muttered, his finger tightening on the trigger. The offer to surrender and die on our knees instead of on our feet like warriors. But Luna's next words shattered every assumption like glass hitting stone. We are indeed government agents, she called, her voice ringing with pride instead of shame. Trained from childhood to serve the United States in whatever capacity required. But we were not trained by this government. Morrison's face went from smug satisfaction to thunderous rage in the space of a heartbeat. Shut your mouth, you little. We serve the Cherokee Nation, Stella interrupted, her voice carrying the same ringing authority as her sister's. The Lakota Nation, the Cheyenne, the Arapaho, the Pawnee, the Crow, and the Shoshone nations. We serve the 7 council fires, and we have been preparing for this day for 3 long years. Understanding hit Jeremiah like lightning splitting a tree. Jesus Christ Almighty. You're double agents. Triple agents, actually. Luna called back, and he could hear the fierce smile in her voice even from this distance. General Morrison, you might want to check your pocket watch. Morrison fumbled for his timepiece with hands that had suddenly begun to shake. What are you? The first explosion came from the direction of Cheyenne, a distant rumble that shook the ground beneath their feet like the footsteps of an angry god. Then another, from the south, followed by a third from the east, then a fourth from the north. What the hell? Morrison began, his face going pale as morning mist. Those would be your supply depots, Stella explained with the conversational tone of someone discussing the weather. Also your ammunition storage facilities, your telegraph stations, and the railroad bridges you were counting on for reinforcements from the east. More explosions followed in rapid succession, a rolling thunder that spoke of months of careful planning and perfect coordination across hundreds of miles of territory. You see, General, Luna continued, her voice now carrying the unmistakable authority of someone who had outmaneuvered an enemy completely. While you were busy believing our reports about tribal locations and gathering all your forces here for what you thought would be the final roundup, The real Seven Council Fires was positioning warriors at every strategic point between here and the Mississippi River. Morrison's face went white as fresh snow. That's impossible. Our intelligence network. Your intelligence came from us, Stella interrupted with savage satisfaction. Every report, every troop movement, every piece of information about Native activities that you've received for the past 3 years. All of it came through our carefully constructed network. And all of it, Luna added, was exactly what we wanted you to know. The sound of war cries echoed from multiple directions as hundreds of native warriors emerged from concealment in the rocks around the mine, like spirits materializing from the earth itself. They had been surrounded, Jeremiah realized with growing amazement, but not by government forces. The trap had been sprung, but Morrison and his men were the ones caught in its jaws. Morrison spun around in a complete circle, finally beginning to grasp the scope of what had happened to him. You've destroyed our entire Western operation. Oh, General, Luna said, and now her voice carried all the regal authority of the princess she truly was. We've done so much more than that. From her jacket, she pulled out a thick bundle of papers that seemed to gleam in the morning light. Every order you've given in the past year, every telegram you've sent, every sordid detail of your final solution, including the mass graves you had dug in advance and the bounties you placed on children's heads. She held the papers high like a battle standard, all of it copied in triplicate and already on its way to newspapers in New York, Philadelphia, Boston, and Washington. By tomorrow morning, the entire country will know exactly what kind of monsters you are. Including, Stella added with deadly precision, producing her own bundle of documents, the names of every politician, every military officer, and every business leader who was part of the conspiracy, with bank records, payment receipts, and signed orders that will hang every last one of you. Morrison's hand moved toward his sidearm with the desperate instinct of a cornered rat, but froze as dozens of rifles swung toward him with the mechanical precision of a firing squad. I wouldn't, Thundercloud advised, emerging from the rocks with a war party of 50 Lakota warriors whose war paint told the story of every village burned, every family murdered, every child stolen. We have been looking forward to this conversation for quite some time. You cannot do this, Marshal Blackwood stammered, his voice cracking like a boy's. We are federal officials. This is treason against the United States government. No, said a new voice that cut through the tension like a cavalry saber, and Jeremiah turned to see a middle-aged white man in an expensive Eastern suit picking his way down the rocky slope with the careful dignity of someone unaccustomed to rough terrain. This is justice, long overdue. The man carried himself with the unmistakable authority of high political office, and his appearance here, in this remote canyon, sent a chill down Morrison's spine that was visible even from a distance. Who the hell are you? Morrison demanded. Secretary of the Interior Daniel Patterson, the man replied. I've been investigating reports of corruption in the territorial administration for 6 months. These young ladies have been very helpful in my investigation. Secretary Patterson, Luna said with a respectful nod. Did you get everything you needed? More than enough to see that General Morrison and his associates spend the rest of their lives in federal prison, Patterson confirmed. The evidence you've provided, including recorded confessions from Marcus Thornfield and others, is quite comprehensive. Morrison looked around wildly, finally beginning to understand how completely he'd been outmaneuvered. This is all illegal. They're enemy combatants. Spies. Actually, Patterson said mildly, they're duly appointed agents of the Department of the Interior, with full authority to investigate crimes against Native peoples in the territories. He smiled. I recruited them myself, 3 years ago, after their parents, the actual chiefs of several tribes, approached me with evidence of systematic corruption in the territorial government. Their parents? Jeremiah asked. Did we forget to mention that? Stella asked innocently. Our father is chief running bear of the Lakota. Our mother is chief white swan of the Cherokee. The prophecy children's story was creative license. Though not entirely inaccurate, Luna added. We were chosen to lead, just not by prophecy. By election. The Seven Council Fires is real, as is the alliance between our tribes. We simply allowed you to believe it was mystical instead of political. Jeremiah shook his head in amazement. So this whole thing, the slave auction, me buying your freedom, The attack by Thornfield, all of it, was planned to get you emotionally invested in our cause, Luna admitted. We needed someone with your reputation and skills, someone who could move freely in white society, but who had the integrity to do the right thing when it mattered. We researched you extensively, Stella added. Jeremiah Cole, age 34, no family, reputation for fairness in dealing with native peoples, skilled tracker and fighter, known to keep his word even when it cost him money. And, Luna continued, most importantly, someone with no ties to the territorial government who couldn't be compromised or bought. You used me, Jeremiah said, though he found he wasn't angry about it. We trusted you, Luna corrected. There's a difference. At any point, you could have turned us in, could have taken the reward money Morrison was offering for information about the prophecy children. You could have walked away when things got dangerous. You didn't, because it was the right thing to do. Exactly, which is why we chose you. Stone Bear had been listening to this exchange with growing amusement. Little sisters, he said, you forgot to tell him the best part. What best part? Jeremiah asked suspiciously. Luna and Stella exchanged another of their meaningful looks. The part where this operation has made you a very wealthy man, Stella said. What are you talking about? Secretary Patterson stepped forward with another bundle of papers. Mr. Cole, the Department of the Interior is authorized to pay substantial rewards for information leading to the arrest and conviction of federal officials engaged in corruption. Your assistance in this investigation qualifies you for the maximum reward. How much is the maximum reward? $50,000, Patterson said, plus an additional $20,000 for the evidence that led to breaking up the slave trading network. Jeremiah stared at him. $70,000? Plus a Congressional Medal of Honor for civilian bravery, Patterson added. Plus, if you're interested, a permanent position as a federal marshal with special jurisdiction over crimes against native peoples. A marshal? The tribes requested you specifically, Luna explained. They trust you. More importantly, they know you'll be fair. Jeremiah looked around at the assembled warriors, at the twins who had played a game more complex than anything he'd ever imagined, at the corrupt officials who were now being secured with their own handcuffs. And if I don't want to be a marshal? Then you take the $70,000 and buy the biggest spread in Wyoming territory, Stella said with a grin. Maybe raise some cattle? Maybe settle down with a nice girl. Any suggestions on the nice girl part? Luna and Stella looked at each other and burst into laughter. We're 16, Jeremiah, Luna said when she could breathe again. Ask us again in about 5 years. Fair enough. 5 years later, Marshal Jeremiah Cole adjusted his badge as he walked up the steps of the Territorial Capitol building in Cheyenne. The building itself was new, built with funds from the mining taxes that now flowed directly to the 7 Council Fires government instead of disappearing into the pockets of corrupt officials. Inside, the territorial legislature was in session, and today they were voting on the most significant piece of legislation in the region's history, the Wyoming Statehood Act, which would create the first state in the Union with constitutionally guaranteed Native representation in government. Marshal Cole, Secretary Patterson greeted him in the hallway. Patterson had been promoted to Secretary of State the previous year, largely on the strength of his success in negotiating the Western Territories peace accords. Right on time. Wouldn't miss it. How's the vote looking? Close, but we should have the numbers. The railroad companies are still fighting it, but they don't have the influence they used to. That was an understatement. The investigation triggered by Luna and Stella's operation had uncovered corruption that went all the way to the highest levels of the federal government. 3 senators, 2 governors, and a cabinet secretary had gone to prison. The railroad companies had been forced to pay massive reparations for land illegally seized from native tribes. Any word from our favorite government agents? Jeremiah asked. Patterson grinned. They're in the gallery. Been there since dawn, making sure nothing goes wrong with the vote. Jeremiah climbed the stairs to the public gallery and found them easily. Luna and Stella standing bear-soaring eagle, now 21 years old, and bearing the titles of Special Agents of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, as well as elected representatives of the 7 Council Fires. They'd grown into their authority over the past 5 years, but they still moved with the same fluid grace he remembered. Marshal Cole, Luna said as he approached. Cutting it close, aren't you? Had to finish a case, he replied, settling into a seat beside them. Caught the last of the Thornfield gang, trying to restart the slave trade down in Colorado Territory. All of them? Stella asked. Every last one. Marcus Thornfield died in Leavenworth Federal Prison last month. Consumption, according to the warden. His associates will be joining him soon enough. Good, Luna said with satisfaction. The world is better without men like that. Down on the floor of the legislature, the speaker was calling for the final vote. One by one, the legislators stood to announce their positions. The count was close, closer than Jeremiah was comfortable with. But Secretary Patterson had been right. The Statehood Act passed by a margin of 4 votes. The gallery erupted in cheers, and Jeremiah found himself swept up in the celebration. Luna was hugging Stella, both of them laughing with relief and joy. Around them, representatives from dozens of tribes cheered and embraced. We did it, Stella said, turning to include Jeremiah in their celebration. We actually did it. You did it, Jeremiah corrected. This was your plan from the beginning. Our plan, Luna said firmly. None of this would have worked without you. As the crowd began to disperse, the 3 of them found themselves walking together toward the Capitol steps. The late afternoon sun painted the mountains gold, and the air carried the promise of an early spring. So what's next? Jeremiah asked. More government work? More undercover operations? Actually, Stella said, we've been thinking about a career change. Such as law school, Luna replied. The 7 Council Fires needs lawyers, good ones who understand both federal law and tribal customs. Harvard has accepted both of us for next fall. Harvard Law School. That's... Jeremiah shook his head in amazement. Your parents must be proud. They are. But more importantly, our people are safe. The 7 Council Fires now has legal standing, federal recognition, and guaranteed representation in government. The days of treating us like conquered peoples are over. And the days of men like Morrison are over too, Stella added. The new territorial government has strict oversight, federal monitors, and legal protections for minority rights. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, each absorbed in their own thoughts about how much had changed. Jeremiah, Luna said finally, can I ask you something? Shoot. That first night, when you cut the ropes off our wrists, did you know, even a little bit, that we weren't what we appeared to be? Jeremiah considered the question carefully. I knew you were more than you appeared to be, he said finally. I could see it in how you carried yourselves, how you spoke, how you handled yourselves when things got dangerous. But government agents? Double agents working a long-term operation to expose corruption and unite 7 tribes. He chuckled. Can't say that was my first guess. What was your first guess? Honestly, I figured you were probably chief's daughters who'd gotten separated from your tribe somehow. Maybe during a raid, maybe during a forced relocation. I thought you were putting on an act to protect yourselves until you could get back to your people. That's not entirely wrong, Stella observed. We were protecting ourselves, and we were trying to get back to our people. We just took a longer route than you expected. 5 years longer. But worth it, Luna said. Look around, Jeremiah. Look what we built. He did look around, and what he saw was remarkable. The city of Cheyenne had grown into a prosperous, integrated community where native and white citizens worked together as equals. The surrounding territory was dotted with successful farms and ranches, many of them joint ventures between tribal members and white settlers. The schools taught both English and native languages. The courts recognized both federal law and tribal customs, and the government included elected representatives from all communities. It wasn't perfect, no society ever was, but it was something unprecedented in American history. A truly integrated territory where different cultures coexisted as equals rather than conqueror and conquered. We built something good, he agreed. We built something that will last, Luna corrected. Something our children and their children can be proud of. Speaking of children, Stella said with a grin, don't you think it's time you started thinking about settling down? You're not getting any younger, Marshall. Jeremiah laughed. Funny you should mention that. I've been giving it some thought lately. Anyone in particular you've been thinking about? Maybe. There are these 2 lawyers-to-be I know. Remarkable women. Smart, brave, beautiful, and about to have law degrees from Harvard. Luna and Stella exchanged one of their looks, the kind that had once made Jeremiah think they were reading each other's minds. That could be complicated, Luna said carefully. Lawyers are busy people. Lots of travel, long hours, complicated cases. Plus, Stella added, there are 2 of them. That could make things awkward. Could, Jeremiah agreed. Or it could make things interesting. Interesting how? Well, I've been thinking about expanding my operation. The 7 Council Fires territory is getting bigger, and I need deputies. Partners, really. People I can trust absolutely, who understand both the law and the people we serve. Go on, Luna said, though Jeremiah could see the smile she was trying to hide. Turns out, there's precedent for husband and wife law enforcement teams. Wyatt and Josephine Earp, for instance. Of course, in this case, it would be more like husband and wives law enforcement team, which is unconventional. Very unconventional, Stella agreed. Some might say scandalous. Some might. Others might say it's exactly the kind of unconventional thinking this territory was built on. They had reached Jeremiah's horse, tied up at the hitching post outside the Capitol. He untied the reins, but didn't mount up immediately. I should probably mention, he said casually, that I put a down payment on some land. Big, spread up in the mountains, good water, plenty of room for horses and cattle. And families. How big a spread? Luna asked. Big enough for a working ranch, a law office, and maybe a house with room for complicated family arrangements. And you're offering us partnerships in this ranch? Stella asked. I'm offering you everything, Jeremiah said seriously. Partnership in the ranch, partnership in the marshal service, partnership in life. All of it. If you're interested. The sisters looked at each other again, and this time Jeremiah was sure he saw an entire conversation pass between them. We would need to finish law school first, Luna said finally. I would expect nothing less. And we would want to practice law as well as work as deputies, Stella added. The territory can always use good lawyers. And the domestic arrangements would have to be worked out carefully. We're not just individuals, Jeremiah. We're representatives of our people. Whatever we do reflects on the 7 Council Fires. I understand. And I'm not in any hurry. Good things are worth waiting for. Luna stepped closer to him, reaching up to straighten his badge. You know, Jeremiah Cole, 5 years ago we told you to ask us again in 5 years. I remember. Well, Stella said, stepping up on his other side. It's been 5 years. So it has. And our answer, Luna said, rising up on her toes to kiss his cheek, is yes. To all of it, Stella added, kissing his other cheek. As Jeremiah mounted his horse and prepared to ride back to his office, he reflected on the strange journey that had brought him to this moment. It had started with 2 scared-looking girls at a slave auction and a decision to do the right thing regardless of the cost. It was ending with 2 brilliant, accomplished women who had changed the course of history, and a future full of possibilities he'd never dared to imagine. See you tonight? Luna called after him. Wouldn't miss it. We've got plans to make. Yes, Stella called back. We do. As he rode through the streets of Cheyenne, Jeremiah tipped his hat to the people who greeted him. White and native, old and young, rich and poor, all of them citizens of a territory that had become something unique in American history. Something worth fighting for. Something worth building. Something worth protecting. And something that had started with a loner cowboy who'd been willing to spend his life savings to buy the freedom of 2 strangers. Sometimes, Jeremiah thought as he rode into the sunset, the smallest acts of kindness had the biggest consequences. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, those consequences included falling in love with 2 remarkable women who'd saved an entire people by convincing the world they were someone else entirely. He was, he decided, a very lucky man indeed.